This video will take you through setting up a longboard. You'll need a deck, hardware, which is 8 nuts and 8 bolts, 4 wheels, 8 bearings, and 2 trucks. You will also need a screwdriver for your hardware, a 10mm wrench for the nuts on the hardware, and a 13mm wrench or socket for the axle nuts. Start by inserting the bolts for the front truck through the 4 holes at the front of the deck, with the heads flush against the top of the deck, and the bolts sticking down. Make sure the heads of the bolts are flush with the top of the deck, and then lay the board down with the top of the deck on the ground. Place the front truck on the hardware, making sure the pivot point is facing forwards. Tighten the hardware nuts down so that the truck is tightly secured against the deck. With the front truck secured, insert the bolts for the rear truck in the same fashion as used for the front truck. Note that the front and rear trucks are identical, but the pivot on the rear truck has to face the rear of the board instead of the front. This allows both trucks to pivot inwards towards the middle of the board when you lean on either side of the board, causing it to turn. With the truck secured to the board, you can now set up the wheels. First, remove an axle nut and one of the 2 washers found underneath the axle nut. Now, place a bearing onto that axle and slide the open hole of one of your wheels down on top of the bearing, pushing firmly on it so that the bearing snaps into place. With that done, the bearing should be mounted securely in the front of the wheel. This also needs to be done for the rear of the wheel. Once the rear bearing is in place, replace the washer that you removed with the axle nut and then tighten the axle nut down. The axle nut should be tight enough to allow the wheel a small bit of play back and forth along the axle, but not so tight that the wheel cannot spin freely. This same procedure needs to be repeated for all 4 wheels. After installing the bearings and tightening the axle nuts on all 4 wheels, you are now done and ready to go.